It's the 16th of July, 2024. Hello, everybody. I'm going to be your host. I'm Dana Durnford. You can call in at 709-589. We're in Canada. 4406. 4406. I think what let me come over and address that, I suppose. I think what general hostility was talking about was that, you know how I do, like I have a 50 second intro where we're waiting for the video to play, and that the transcript from that doesn't spell my name, it spells it Dana Turner instead of Dana Durnford. Because I start off a lot of those videos, hi, I'm Dana Durnford, right? At least that's my take, anyway. So I don't know if it's accurate or not. Let's get after it. Let's get after it. The crazies. The nuclear industry all have this one thing in common, and everybody else has something in common with it too. It's radioactive fallout. And there's a lot of ways to articulate it, because it's going on from 1,000 fuel pools worldwide, still splitting atoms on a rate that is just, it's devastating everything with replicating cells. Japan completes the 7th round of Fukushima treated water release. It's actually 4,870 days or so of straight releases. Right? There is no containment. There is no buildings. They're completely gone. But there is a lot of stuff left over. There's a lot burnt off. There's 2 fuel pools at the top of each building. Each fuel pool with decades of reactor cores burnt off. The operator, and so last year on August 24th, they came out and claimed that was their first release from buildings that detonated. The whole story is absurd, but the world believes their version. They don't know the real version. And the real version is quite frightening. Completed the 7th round of the 7th round of water releases. And this is the cover story, right? The operator of the crippled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant on Tuesday completed a 7th round of treated radioactive water discharge into the ocean. 7,800 tons of water in the latest rounds, which started on June the 28th of 2023. And they're saying no abnormal tritium levels were detected in the nearby water. So what they're saying is they're only looking for tritium, and that there was no releases until last year. And this particular release started on June the 28th of this year, 2024. When you look at the incredible amount of radiation that has came out of there, that they acknowledge, that they emit to, that's never going to go away. And then all of a sudden, last year, on July the 13th, 2023, the International Atomic Energy Agencies, the medias worldwide, Japan, regulatory agencies all changed their narrative and said there's nothing got out on a tritium, and that's controlled. We're releasing that. And everything is filtered, and we're the nuclear industry, we got everything under control. That's quite a fairy tale, right? Saying no abnormal tritium levels were detected in the nearby water, which is nearby Medusa and Medusa, Reactor 3 and Reactor 4. and Reactor 1 and Reactor 2, and the common spent fuel pool, and Reactor Building 6, and another abnormality towards west coast, or the west side of the site, the top west side of the site, so southwest side. And no abnormal tritium levels, but I mean, these are equal to well, each reactor core is probably 100 Chernobyls, and each fuel pool would have had probably 4 to 5 reactor cores in it, because they don't have a repository anywhere. So these things were stuffed. The numbers we're talking about it's unbelievable, and yet the official story is Chernobyl is the world's worst nuclear meltdown, which again defies any rational. It's simply a cover-up, right? But it's shocking, because for it to work, they have to have all the universities worldwide, all the media worldwide have to play a part, and so does all the governments and key positions and key interviewers and key policymakers, key major. Everybody has to play that part in order for the story to work. So it seems more like, no, Dana's probably wrong. There really was nothing got out of the buildings. Even though they got the models of the radioactive fallout and the studies showing the falling out, in numbers that we've never even heard tell of, even during a nuclear war, you call nuclear testing for some reason. This was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor detonating, reactor 3. And they're claiming there's only 7 releases. Well, the first release was 9/10 of the inventories of all the buildings that were involved. No abnormal tritium detected. Prior to the discharge, the water used to cool the melted fuel at the plant is passed through an advanced liquid processing system that removes most radionuclides apart from tritium. So the story is regurgitated in every media on the entire planet. So let's go back to 2013 to challenge that particular assertion. In 2013, in February, they invited the media, the press pool, into Fukushima, and they had flyover shots, showed the expansion of the tanks and other storage. And this is one of the pictures. This was the ELP decontamination system. The Riva had an exact system like it. Whenever you look at these pictures, one thing you notice is this absence of people, right? Or absence of vehicles, or absence of anything. There's no birds, there's no anything. In August 9, 2014, Fukushima contaminated water problems worsened. The disaster site has struggled with water decontamination for years, and just announced recently that they think they finally have the ELPS decontamination system operational. But in 2013, they said all the tanks were full from pumping up below the reactor buildings from an aquifer that's down there. And admitting the efforts to freeze the trench was not going well. Of course, you can't decontaminate the water when the system didn't exist. And so for the first 4 years, because this is August 9, 2014, and they were estimated the end of the year, but it was 2015 before the ELP system. But once they got the ELP system, then they ran into even more problems. I was really sick last night, and I couldn't get a show done. I didn't dream I was doing a show tonight. And still not up to par. very uncomfortable pain above my solar plexus. I was working really hard the day before for about 4.5 hours straight on my back. And I was busted up really good. But I didn't have that pain in particular the next morning when I woke up. And around 10 a.m. I got this pain. I ended up going to bed probably 10-15 minutes later and sleeping for an hour. And I was only up for a couple of hours at that stage, right? And there was no reason to go back to bed. And today there's about 30% of it, of what was there yesterday. So I'm really happy about that. Okay, so let me do this. Let me go this way. Let's explain the water filtration system. It's been doing this for 13 years, but here's the official story. August 12, 2014, TEPCO to abandon the REVA system, water filtration system, which was the same as the ELP system. And REVA, right, is the government of France. And so if they can't work it out, there's no way that Japan's going to work it out because they have much more. Japan sends their fuel to France to be road processed. So it's highly unlikely that Japan can filter it. But you can't filter it because the filter is too radioactive to get near and change after about 20 minutes. You can't get back in the building because the filters are not 6 feet thick lead for starters. For the last 3 years, the REVA system was unused and kept out of operation for the last 3 years, but this is 2014. So there was no REVA system in 2011, I can tell you that. The ELP system, April 21st, 2014, has yet to function reliably, but if you go to August 9, 2014, not April, it wasn't even completed, right? So they were putting out fake headlines. I mean, there's places there they didn't even, that humans couldn't go to. Mm-hmm. And the numbers we're talking about at 100 million atoms per cubic centimeter in the sludge. It's 2011. These are absurd numbers. TEPCO says the bypass operation wasn't having an effect where they were going to pump water from coming down the mountain around the site and directly into the ocean. That didn't work because it goes through the site and is immediately viciously contaminated. They failed to deliver on the promise to install a fence. They said it was going to cost $1 billion. But they spend money down, like the amount of money they spent there is absurd. It's like $30 billion for 30 million one-ton bags they spent to pick up. And that was all homeless. There was no academics. They couldn't build a fence to stop the radiation going into the Pacific because it doesn't work that way. You got no bottom, you got no top, and it just redirects around it. It's absurd to suggest you could build a fence. TEPCO's ice wall didn't meet expectations. In fact, it doesn't stop the groundwater. And why would you build an ice wall when you can build a real wall? And the ice wall takes around $9 million a year to work. The American government flew over it shortly after the meltdown, 1,000 feet above the ground, and they showed 3 million atoms per square meter, 20 kilometers up to 20 kilometers away, right? And what that meant, though, is there 10 times more iodine-132, 30 times more iodine-133, 31 times more iodine-129, and then the reactors don't run on that. Their biggest byproduct is curium isotopes. So whatever number you see in, say, for the iodine-129, which is 31 times more than the 131, which is 3 million atoms per square meter, you want to multiply that by 32 at least, in order to get the curium-244, which needs lead shielding 20 times thicker than plutonium-238, which is named after the devil because it's so harmful. It killed all the dogs in all the studies, and the majority of dogs had 3 different tumors, and the tumors that killed the most were the skeleton tumors. But don't forget, there's all the other isotopes that you got to put into the equation, right? And then people in the know acknowledge that everything is out of control. This is an apocalypse. France, who showed you models of 1 million to 10 million atoms per square meter worldwide, certainly in North America, Canada, United States, of cesium-137 per square meter, up to 10 million atoms, which each of them pulls 600 feet a second. So it's full body X-rays on top of that, see? Because they're interacting, they're bouncing off the alphas, the neutrons, the betas. The cesium's a gamma. Swiss embassy evacuates Tokyo fearing radiation, that's all you really need to know, right? Tokyo's lost almost all control of the events at Fukushima. Nuclear report warns of an apocalyptic scenario at Fukushima. This could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet. So I launched research expeditions. And that's why we have this particular poll. Is 13 years of radioactive fallout and perpetual discharge from the Fukushima, hang on here, from Fukushima an extinction level event? And so let me show you some of that evidence, because that's fun. So we launched research expeditions for 6 years in British Columbia alone, where I plied the coastline. There's 27,000 islands. And we left no stones unturned. We hit everything, year after year, 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean, doing species counts. And we're doing it due to the radioactive fallout. Me and my trusty sidekick, Zoe. The radioactive fallout covered the whole planet. Typically, it's 20 to 30 days. And so the species to your left were exterminated and didn't recover. And this is why we went back year after year to see if the species to your left recovered. And the species did not recover. They didn't come back. And so that's why we can quantify that particular assertion that this is an extinction event, because a glass of seawater would typically have 1 billion creatures into it. And 75 to 100 million of them would have been the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. The biggest oxygen producer on our planet is the phytoplankton in the Pacific Ocean. And the other 900 million creatures in a glass of water are the eggs and larvae of the species to your left. This is like the zooplankton, right? They're very microscopic, but they're still, at some stages, they're still considered the phytoplankton in their very early stages. And the absence of them, because if you plowed in a healthy beach like to your left, or if you plowed in that beach and made it look like this, the species on both sides and deeper, all the way down to 900 feet, would have filled in the gap. But they didn't. And these species are well known. There's 27,000 islands in British Columbia. 27,000. It would take you 71 years to visit each island. And all of them would have had these particular attributes. Incredible, right? Just absolutely astonishing looking. Now, when you look at these people pretending they're in a building to your left at the fuel pool at the very top of it. The reason they're doing that is because the species have been wiped out. And at the high tide line was another 30,000 insects, well-known studied insects. There was around 700 algae in the tidal zones. And in those 700 algae were around 5,500 invertebrates without the backbones. And just like little shrimp, right? And they would feed all kinds of migratory species. But the 30,000 insects at the top would feed all the insects too. Insects would feed all the birds too. Hundreds of thousands, not millions. There was 192 species. New Mexico sees a massive migratory bird death. It was 192 species. The majority of these were insect eaters. They're extremely emaciated. They have no fat reserves, barely any muscle mass. It's almost as if they have been flying until they just couldn't fly anymore. They couldn't find any food. And we covered this when it happened, 2020, extensively because there was a lot of headlines about it. And they tried it, immediately they started coming out with all kinds of cover stories. They were trying to blame it on cold weather. They were trying to blame it on wildfires and stuff like this. But the wildfires and cold weather has been going on long before the human experience, right? These animals are they were superior selections of all the species. And right, they were able to coexist with all the extremes. And that was their migratory route is full of extremes, right? Because they're migrating. And so we went from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska year after year after year. And the species to your left never came back. Okay, now come back to that story about Fukushima, tritium. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags, but none of those bags are filled with what they say tritium. Now everything is tritiated. All the rainwater worldwide now is permanently tritiated because the upper atmosphere, the entire biosphere is saturated with anthropogenic man-made radiation. That's what creates the tritiated water. It's radioactive water. But you can't have water on this planet that's not and radioactive. In some places is worse, like Japan. TEPCO detected 18 atoms of tritium per liter from seawater samples from the facility's outlet itself, below its own limit of 700 atoms required for the discharge to be halted, and far under the World Health Organization limits of 10,000 atoms of tritium. And they don't even have the courtesy to use the word 3H, tritium 3H. But these bags, 30 million one-ton bags, are not full of tritium. And in fact, the only one that they acknowledge is cesium and tritium. There are some other isotopes that they have acknowledged, but they don't currently acknowledge anything but cesium and tritium. And they make the stunning claim that they can get cesium. They can't. It doesn't work that way. You can't separate the isotopes from a nuclear meltdown in filters because the filters can't be changed because they're so radioactive. So imagine like a water filter. You know how a water filter eventually it'll get full of all kinds of particles. It'll be really slow, right, trying to filter water. With radiation, once you get so much radiation after half an hour into the filter, and you're talking about 2.2 sieverts per liter, basically. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose to a human. And you're not drinking it, just hanging out close to it for a little short while. 10 sieverts is a lethal dose just hanging out for a minute, and you'll die that day sometime. If there's 20 sieverts in that right there in that area, that's a lethal dose. Your organs will start to melt and you'll die about 40, 50 minutes later. If you got 50, 60 sieverts of fuel, then what happens is your organs will start melting. Right away, you'll get really sick. You'll have diarrhea, basically. And you've seen this in Nagasaki, Hiroshima, and it's pretty graphic. That's unfortunately part of the story. A lot of the victims had been found at Nagasaki, Hiroshima outside the blast zone from radiation. Their organs had melted where they had dropped their pants and squatted down and died right there. And some of them were found in that position. Severely burnt too, right? But their organs had melted, not from the heat, but from the radiation exposures. The first round of water release went ahead in August 2023. Now, when you look at the buildings, they're saying nothing got out until 2023. And this is a key step in decommissioning. And so just to finish off that story, rather, was when you're taking 2.2 sieverts per liter, putting it through a filtration system, it only takes 20 minutes or something to get 1,000 sieverts. And then 20 minutes later, so you're talking multiple thousands in the first hour. You can't get back in the building. And then the way they described the Fukushima, it suffered a fuel meltdown. So instead of a nuclear reactor meltdown, they call it a fuel meltdowns. So for the average person, those connotations don't bring any urgency, any prominence to the reality of it. And it wasn't 3 reactors, it was 4 reactors. Reactor 4 clearly was destroyed. And they refused to acknowledge it. What they done was they built this contraption off-site, assembled it alongside of it. And this is the one part, there's 4 parts like this. And then they put a cover over these things and said that they were actually in the fuel pool. I showed you pictures earlier of them pretending they're in the fuel pool. This was the evacuation zones. That's the communities. You can see the names in that particular shot. And in this one, you see the orange is difficult to return zone. Now, we've never used that terminology ever before. It's always been called a nuclear wasteland. But Japan had no intentions of not. Now, they didn't stop growing food there. You just weren't allowed to live there. The story meets the definition of insanity. There is no horror story like Fukushima. Russia's radioactivity evaluation of Fukushima spill concludes. They say they won't have the results for another couple of months or something. So it's not concluded, but they concluded, and I'll show it to you now. The Russian research vessel academic Oparin today completed the mission to assess the Pacific waters after Japanese spill of radioactive water. Now, I just showed you my research expeditions a few moments ago. From the earthquake damage, Fukushima nuclear power, and these connotate earthquake damage, tsunami damage. They don't want nuclear. Whenever you see this, they're trying to avoid a bad rep, right, for nuclear. I can blame it on this and blame it on that, blame it on poor maintenance, blame it on something, right? But don't let the nuclear industry get. And then to suggest there's any damage, this is reactor 3, for instance. It's not damage. The reactor core and the fuel pools are actually gone. And I'm heartbroken because nobody tells the story. There's nobody out there telling this story. And nobody out there is saying reactor 3 is gone. There's nobody doing it. And I'm freaked out by that. Do you agree with me that reactor 3 is gone? The fuel pools are at the top of the buildings and the reactor cores at the top of the buildings. These are 190-foot tall buildings and are 150 feet by 150 feet square, 65 meters tall, 19 stories tall, 190 feet tall. You have a 19-story apartment building, for instance. The scientists explained the expedition began on June the 4th, was organized jointly with the prestigious Kurchatov Institute, leading research institute in nuclear energy and molecular physics, and the Shaolin State University. The aim of this expedition, whenever you hear the word university and nuclear, you know there's the biggest whopper lies coming right behind it. Anything to do with a professor and nuclear is get ready to get stabbed in the back and the side of your head. The aim of the expedition was to understand what was happening in the Pacific due to the release of a story. And you know how many of these people have ever quoted me? None. And unfortunately, I'm the most prolific producer of material on this subject. And that's frightening and heartbreaking. To the release of the stored water from the Fukushima nuclear power plant that began last year. So they're basing their studies on the official narrative, which is a propaganda. I just went painstakingly dissected for you up to this point, right? According to the official information, those waters underwent treatment to remove all the radionuclides. They're very careful to protect themselves, aren't they? Except tritium. Radioactive xenon-133 in Washington, United States, was 450,000 times above detection levels after Fukushima, and it persisted for weeks because it's a short half-life on xenon, which meant there was continuous ongoing nuclear meltdowns. But they only acknowledged tritium in the newest story, right? So here's cesium-137 plume forecast, backed up by studies from France's IRSN, which is the Institute of Radiological Protection and Nuclear Safety in France. It's the government. And you see there, watch the animation of the IRSN's website here. I'm going to show you that in a second. And by the way, French government's experts in nuclear and radiation risk, 1 million times normal after Fukushima. Cesium-137, which pulses energy 600 feet a second, each atom, and there was around 10 million atoms per square meter pulsing energy 600 feet. That's as frightening as any meteorite, and it's as catastrophic as any meteorite. The only thing is, it's worse than that because you don't see it. Right, and it plays it over a few decades. You can't smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it. And this was allowed to happen. This was allowed to become the worst case scenario. This is their model. And this model, I believe, is based on 31 days of 10 million atoms per square meter. So by the 25th, we're looking at right now, this is day 20 after the tsunami, 15 days after the last reactor detonated for the first times. The whole planet is covered at about 10 million atoms per square meter of just the cesium-137. So you can extrapolate that this is catastrophic to everything with replicating cells. And just because we're at the top of the food chain, don't mean we're getting off easy with this. So this is why we got a poll asking a simple question. Is 13 years of radioactive fallout and the perpetual discharges, they can't contain it, folks. And they have monsoons and everything, or not monsoons, but typhoons and that wash all kinds of radioactive pollen, radioactive leaves, radioactive debris across the entire country. The entire country is irradiated. And everybody else, but they're brutal amounts released each year they refuse to be good stewards of humanity and the 8 million species. And in fact, they chose the path of cover-up, which means you can guarantee this is going to morph into an extinction event. And through our research expeditions, which are still ongoing, we can quantify those assertions, unfortunately. And so I just, the weekend I was out on the boat looking. Let me see what I got going on here. Let's go through some pictures I took the weekend. Bear with me, we're almost there. Because I got a big show tonight, but I'm never going to get to those pictures if I don't just go ahead and do it. So let's go ahead and do it. What do you think? Oh, let me get back in here. I did find some really interesting stuff, though. Now, when it comes to birds, I only counted, I think it was 4 or 5 or something. Yeah, let's go through these. It's pretty straightforward. I was trying to catch a picture of the I think it's the red-breasted bird. Bear with me. And I didn't have the right setting for the camera. I fixed that yesterday. Oh, he's right there. This is, you see him. I don't know if we get a clear shot of him. Yeah, we do in a little bit. These are all, it's very difficult. The boat is swinging around. You can see there's some wave action. Wind's blowing in that area. And I was trying to figure out what he was. Was he a sandpiper? Or, and I think we got a clear shot. I apologize. There was also a... where are these two now? This guy here, I got some clean shots coming up of him in a second. Yeah, so when you hear me talking about a red-breasted bird, I seen 3 of them. And this guy was following me along the shoreline, staying slightly ahead of me. It was really difficult to get a shot of him. And so I never got a really clean shot, I don't think, of him. But I only counted 4 birds in 4.5 hours. And it's a beautiful place, right? This is a pristine place. Now, I'm also particularly looking for spiders. And because you can check the spider webs to see which species are in the area. And there should be about 500,000 per acre. And there's actually none. Not the one. I thought it was a red-breasted robin, but I don't know what kind of species. I didn't look it up, unfortunately, because I'm not in the best of shape, and I never done my due diligence. So you can look it up. Correct me. I'm going to say a red-breasted robin. You can say, no, Dana. It's a red-breasted something or another. But we already got pictures of them. I got pictures of them flying. Because I wasn't sure if I was getting a shot of them or not. And this one was really interesting. I seen a dragonfly on a lily plant flower. And then I realized there was larvae, what I think is dragonfly larvae right there. There's 2 of them, right? That's the larvae. But then I seen 2 flies. And at the top of it, not only was a dragonfly, which is the predator, he's like the A10 warthog of insects, that feller. And there was I'm not sure if it's a bee or a wasp, but there was also, looks like there's more insects in the background. I was like, holy shit, I hit the mother lode. There's like a whole colony of different species. I was like, wow, this is amazing. Despite the fact we only seen 4 birds total, but 3 of them were red-breasted, and one of them was that one I showed you originally, but unfortunately it wasn't a clear photo. And that was due to my... And so it looks like he was attacking this guy. See that? He was going for the bee. Yeah, that's a bee. But we get other shots of... And this is in order. So he came back in and landed. He's staring him in the face. And then he goes for it again. And he gets hold of him by the looks of it. And so this was wonderful to see this ecosystem. You see there's another little insect there, another one up right there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there's 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 insects on these 2 lily pads. And that really made me feel good, believe it or not, because it's so rare to see anything. I was like, so this is what the ecosystem actually looks like. It's been years trying to get a picture like that. Now you got the bees up there and the dragonflies right there. I'm trying to get pictures of the other... There was some of the flowers. I didn't see any pollinators. The only bee we seen was out here. So it looks like he never got his bee, right? There's a fly right there, and that could be a fly right there with a mouse is too. And that probably a fly right there too. I got a tendency to take a lot of pictures and hope one of them will come out clean. And I apologize for not vetting the pictures. This was there was two twigs sticking out of the water. You can see a dragonfly on that one, a blue one, and a blue one on this one. And I was trying so hard to get... I had to back up, make a sharp turn. Now there's 3, I think. There's one close to the water too. Yeah. So there's 3 dragonflies right there. And I think I've seen a total of 6 or 7 dragonflies. But I've seen more dragonflies out of my garden after rain than I do on a beautiful, massive pond. That's like a 4-kilometer pond with a bunch of islands and good little nooks, right? This was one of those little nooks. But outside of that, there was nothing to be seen. But it was still wonderful to see something because we struggle so hard. And I got no idea what I was taking there. Okay, so then yesterday we went down to Witless Bay. And we can see gulls were feeding. And it's hard to appreciate how far they are actually away from us. Because I had the zoom lens on, right? But I was able to get some pretty good shots. And we're looking for, you can see 2 of them right there. That's puffins. And that's the puffin capital. That's the puffin capital. And this is a really important shot. This is look at this. This is excrement on the rocks. And so this is what I was talking about last year up here where we were doing research. And there's around 46 million migratory species come through here each year, right? And they basically didn't come through the last 3 years for sure, right? The 3.3 million storm petrels in Barracuda Island have not showed up. And then when we went out and looked at all the nurseries for the migratory birds where they raised their fledglings, their chicklets too, there was none of that excrement. We didn't see any pictures last year, did we, of that? Look at that. And down there, there's supposed to be don't quote me, but 250,000 breeding pairs of puffins. Now, last year the puffins colonies failed. They produced some eggs, but they didn't produce very many, and all the chicklets, all of them failed apparently. So this is close to where I was with some puffins. And they're feeding on capelin. They were diving. Now they'll dive 60, 70, 80, 100 feet all day long. And they're generally going to get capelin. And usually you'll see them, they'll have 2 or 3 or 4 capelin in their beak. They're very heavy birds, not like seagulls that can loiter over an area. They're very awkward. But they nest on cliffs. And you've seen the excrement on those rocks. Well, the cliffs down here don't have any sign of that happening, even though it's been going on for 1 million generations. And so I did manage, we didn't get out to the colonies. I didn't research it enough. It was kind of a random thing, and I just went for it. But it was pretty awesome to see them. But we know last year, because they're nesting all the way up until September, they laid eggs twice. And we've seen that with the kittiwakes, where they didn't produce any litter, any fledglings whatsoever. And then the cormorants last year, they produced the most chicks, the most fledglings. And they're divers. They dive very deep, right? They eat bigger fish. And then, but there is capelin here. And they were looking really bad earlier, but they're starting, some of us looking pretty good apparently right now. For like, because you're talking about ratios of males to females. But because they're a keystone species, and so many of these species, the majority of the species, whales included, seals and sea lions and otters and everything else is dependent upon them to raise their newborns. We shouldn't be fishing them, right? But the greedy Japanese, they want the females for roe. They want to eat the eggs rather than let the eggs produce, which is the quickest way to exterminate the species, particularly after a severe nuclear accident has broken the food chain. And in the background, you can see that's a puffin, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, probably 7, 8, at least 7, 8, 9 deer. And so that's a good sign. That's more than we've seen on this coastline. And this is a sanctuary, so there's probably 25 to 40 in that out there if you looked really hard. So that was pretty interesting. I didn't get to see the colonies, and so I'm probably going to go back over with the boat next week or the week after. I got to work on the big boat and figure out what I've screwed up, because I crossed a wire over and blew probably the solenoid or something. I don't know. There's something standard that'll give out on you and you just replace it. And it's been tough here, isn't it? Trying to get everything. We got a lot we're trying to accomplish. And so we got some good puffins right there. These were diving. There was pretty steady diving going on. And we did see a couple of miles east of it, we seen a lot of seagulls. I tried to get down close to them. But you had to travel quite a ways to get there. And so there's Cape St. Mary's is about an hour and a half away. The next trip will be go over to Cape St. Mary's and check out the colony, because we went there. They have a big colony of gannets, and a lot of them starved to death last year, right? And so that was really cool, though. We got over and checked that out and found some. But that doesn't mean much when you're not finding it on the migratory route itself, only at that particular, these are protected colonies. There's 3 islands off that shoreline, and that's where the colonies are. You can see part of one and the other one over right here. And I think the other one's over that direction. This was This was Saturday. I hit the motor Saturday and busted up my prop on the 8 horsepower right away too. I'm going to swap that engine out. I was trying to pull off the carburetor tonight to clean out the jets on it, because I had put a new carburetor in that a few years ago that came from the manufacturer, because we're still under warranty, right? It's a brand new engine that we used up to Alaska quite a few years, mind you. But it was well taken care of. It still looks brand new on the inside. I got to pull the carburetor off and soak it in diesel and then clean it with gasoline, pull the jets out, and let me turn the volume on here. I never had the volume on, did I? What the hell? Get back on target here. Just trying to figure it out to do the full screen. And I meant to upload this. I got. So we're looking for any birds or insects or anything at all. We found nothing basically. And this is kind of just a. There's some insects. A guessing game today, but we'll get some research in. And hopefully the video is recording in high quality. Okay, I apologize, I'm still not up to speed. So it don't matter because we got no audio. Okay, so 4 or 5 birds. 3 of them were the red breast. One was a little tiny finch. I'm not sure because I didn't get a picture or a good look at him, but I seen him going through the trees. And the other one was, I thought was a sandpiper, but I couldn't get a good picture of it. And he used to fly away from me when I get close to him, and he would make a circle and come back in and hide and watch me. So that was kind of interesting. I got to look up that species of the red-breasted to see if they're insect eaters. The first one is he eats fish and that, as far as I can tell. Now I seen a frog out in my garden today, and last year I had every day you would see, if you go out, you'll see 10, 12, 14, 15 each day in the garden, going from one pond to another pond. But there he is there. You can see him right there, right? Little bugger. Bless his heart. And you didn't see any predators. You didn't see any crows or any other kind of birds, predatory birds feeding on the frogs. And you won't see any birds in this lake, like seabirds. Well, that's a lie. There was a loon, and he seems to be a residential loon for this pond. And there's not a lot of color on the beaches. There's not a lot of pollinated flowers. And because I'm so close to the shoreline, I was expecting some insects. There was 6 mosquitoes came out and hung out on the boat for quite a while. Kept me company, if that's possible with mosquitoes. And I hit the motor and I hit the bottom a couple of times, but we don't care now because we got a hard bottom Zodiac, thank goodness. It's unbelievably steady. And when I was coming back in to put the boat on the trailer, for the last 4 minutes or something, I was able to, it works very steady. It's unbelievable. And so I got to build just a little mount to put the gimbal into it, because I'm using a big camera with the big gimbal. There he is right there. That's a good shot. I think he's an insect eater, that guy. And it was that's what we're seeing on the ponds, is that same species. We're not seeing anything different. We're not seeing any migratory birds or anything like that. And that's because of the radioactive fallout. When it's in the forest, it sterilizes all the insects, the birds, and everything else. So unless they're migratory, you're not seeing the typical 370 residential species at all. You're seeing the migratory. And the gray robins, of course, they're notorious for being very bold, very brazen, right? You can feed them out of your hand. They love cheese. I've got videos we put on the site before of them taking cheese right out of my fingers. Come up and put their feet on my arm for 1 second, grab the cheese, and shoot off again. And there's usually like, you'll see a pair of them, but only one of them will come close to you. We figure it's the male. And he brings it back and gives it to the female. If she likes it, he comes looking for more. And I'm glad I'm feeling a bit better tonight, today, even. Because I was very concerned. I was very, very concerned. And so I don't know, maybe I should post those videos. Maybe I should post the videos instead of just showing them here. Because they are pretty high quality. Maybe that's what I'll do tonight or tomorrow. French Barracuda-class nuclear attack submarine Tourville begins sea trials. French Barracuda-class nuclear attack submarine. The problem with that is they can't attack anybody because that's what causes a nuclear war, right? But all your precious metals, all your resources, an unimaginable amount of resources. And then for every day they're on the ocean, you need, I don't know, was it 2 days of maintenance or something? And that's why they need so many of these things, because they're always, they can last a long time because they're nuclear, but they can't because of the maintenance. So, like, it underwent rigorous testing of its onboard systems and equipment, including the crucial startup of its nuclear boiler room on the 24th of April this year. These preliminary tests conducted in the Kachin bases confirmed the submarine is watertight. Well, that's pretty good, I guess. It's insane. They got, like, how many of them have we got scuttled out there on the ocean floor with nuclear missiles and nuclear reactors hemorrhaging into the ecosystem forever? It's such a hateful industry. It cares about nothing at all. This is United Kingdom. Community group gets $1 million, $1 million sterlings, is it? Pounds, British pounds, from Nuclear Waste Agency. The proposed development would use the site of the former gas storage terminal. Now, I don't know about you, but when I look in the background, I'm pretty sure I'm looking at farms. Is that just me, or am I seeing farms? So when you see this picture, it looks pretty good, right? And you see this picture at all of the site, you got farms all the way up to the fence of it. Has given $1 million to the local community group because they want to get them dependent, right, on all this easy money. That's how it works for the nuclear industry. And $1 million means nothing when they got who knows how many billions grown interest every day. And they don't want a solution. This is strictly about keeping your brain from asking questions. So why are they surrounded by farms? Money to the food bank, the village halls, the local blind society, the educational projects. They're such nice people, aren't they? Until you get to know them, then you realize these are sadistic demons. These are actual monsters, this industry, everybody in it. There's no redeeming qualities. Why is it always surrounded by farms as far as you can see, I wonder? Quite a coincidence. The waste plan has attracted opposition with local councillors calling for a referendum on the development. And 16, well, they keep passing out money, they'll win the referendum if they really want to. They can win it. 16 projects have been selected for funding by the Deep Geological Repository Facility Community Partnership. These are the very large partnership with the devil, right? They'll probably give you that food to the food bank too. Interim chairman from around the nuclear. See, the nuclear, everything goes to the nuclear dumps, sites, nuclear waste sites, nuclear power plants. Everything is surrounded by farms to get rid of the local emissions, right? It gets sucked up in the food. The farms are shipping the food out. And they always have these weird drawings. Their solution is to dig a hole, put everything down in the hole and run away, because eventually it's going to melt down. But what they're thinking is, you won't be here when it does, and so it doesn't matter. That's how they think, right? That they're completely insane. And why is it that almost every nuclear power plant you look at is surrounded by farms? Worldwide, this phenomenon is true. And then there's all kinds of studies that clearly show that growing food alongside of nuclear emissions is a recipe for diseases to everybody that's consuming the food. But this is what you see when you look up nuclear power plants. That's the rapeseed oil. Stay away from that stuff. Cesium-137 immediately damages the heart muscle. So when you're eating a lot of food from these beautiful farms, because you can't perceive the radiation, or smell it or feel it or taste it, then you become complacent, because they don't teach this in schools. They don't teach this. You're not going to show studies like this to students in high schools or anywhere else. Cesium vertical soil transfer by a tree root system. If it does it to a tree root, it'll do it to everything else, right? Well, why is all the nuclear power plants have farms all the way up to their borders? Nuclear radiologists, don't be fooled by paid industry consultants. Low doses of ionizing radiation do causes cancer, but it causes heart and liver and lung and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline. And it also causes Alzheimer's and dementia and autism and diabetes and Down syndrome and schizophrenia. Your immune system is compromised, so you're also more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign, right? So part of one of my jobs is to make people articulate it so they can win any debate. That's my goal. I have many goals, really, but one of my goals is to create a million little bastards just like me that can't be beaten in a conversation about nuclear, and will not only, they will dominate the debate with facts that are incontestable, that are unassailable. And I think I've won that battle already. And experimentally determining translocations of 134 cesium in potatoes. And the exact same can be applied for uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium, or any other isotopes. If cesium will do it, everything else will do it too. So why is every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms? Is that a coincidence? An accident even? Or is it a sinister plot to poison people in the supermarkets? An estimation of the half-life period's 137 cesium content in the root inhabited soil layer of meadow ecosystems. Why are all nuclear? See the skinny stacks with the red and white stripes? They're venting radiation from the fuel pools, from the tourist where it gets burped out. They're venting it from the incinerators on site that are legally allowed to burn radioactive material. And this is simply not acceptable that they do this. It's 100% the opposite of smart. Health physicists in the United States worry about inhaling hot particles. Well, the worst one, I think, is going to be the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs from the salt water coming in contact with 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures and being liberated and create these spherical balls. And they can ingest curium isotopes, the plutonium, uraniums, the americiums, the neptuniums, the strontiums, and everything else. And they become super hot particles. And they're not solutable in water, able to traverse long distances. They don't need the jet stream. They're much smaller than anthropogenic pollution from the industries like automobile and automotive industries or typical pollution that crosses oceans and adds to the indexes of countries. These are so tiny. These are a fraction. These are 1/10,000th the size of the pollution that is able to go across oceans, but is catastrophic to everything with replicating cells. Your body attacks it for the rest of your life. Once it's in your body with white blood cells, and eventually tries to build a tumor around it. 16,000 homeless and destitute and victims of society and immigrants that don't speak the language quit Fukushima. Most likely severe working conditions at a nuclear meltdown is dead people dropping dead all around them. Plume model showed 1 million atoms over the west coast. This was the Xenon 133, I believe. 20 million particles, actual particles. And that's one of the worst case scenarios, is the particles are infinitely worse than the atoms. A radioactive iodine 131 per liter fell on the U.S. post-Fukushima. And the west coast was hit with 220 million atoms per liter of iodine 129. So in particular, the 131 and 129s, these numbers we're talking about is enough to saturate the thyroid glands of all the species. And so they slowly but surely stop reproducing, and then the last generation is the last generation to reproduce, will eventually die and disappear, right? And then all the species that are dependent upon them, because that food chain is never ending, right? Then the water is completely contaminated. Your most precious thing on the planet is your water. Your very life, it's equal to your blood. It's just as important as your blood. Without no water, you have no life. Without no water, you have no future. And when you radiate all the water, it makes it poison. Then, because there's so much of the whole ecosystem, the way the water, for instance, like, because you have an ocean above you. All the water is connected worldwide. And then, for instance, on the Atlantic and the Pacific, Indian Oceans and other oceans, tens of thousands of miles on each of them of rain clouds are produced each day, and they work their way to a continent or a coastline. And when they hit mountains, then they'll lose a large part of their payload, rise up and go over the mountain and release a bigger payloads to the interior, right? And you're talking about a cycle of radiation fallout that is we don't have like, this is so important. You got to include that in that equation. So it's a resaturation of the biosphere, the ecosystem, and the continents, and a lot of it washes down to the coastlines. The coastlines are the nurseries. But this radiation wrecks the fungus and the bacteria. on your continents. And then so they stop, they kill them, right? And so without the bacteria and the fungus, the biota, the ecosystem can't exist. Like plants can't exist. They can exist, but they can't perform without the fungus and the bacteria, because it retains water, and water is good for the ecosystem, and the ecosystem, all the little species have their little niches, and that's what breaks down the foliage and the litter and everything else. And the dead insects all get broken down, and there's a whole system. But if you take that out of the equation, we talked about this 8 or 9 years ago, where we were saying what you expect to see happen is going to be flash floods wherever this stuff is permeating to. You can expect eventually start seeing huge flash floods because the ground is not soaking up water no more. It doesn't have the biota anymore. It doesn't have the bacteria and the fungus. And then on top of that, you expect to see huge forest fires going on continent-wide because the foliage and the litter didn't break down, and so it gathers up over 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years. Then you get these lightning strikes, and this huge amounts of foliage and litter that didn't normally exist because it would broke down, because a healthy ecosystem will break it down fairly efficiently and quickly, will wafer up and drop down thousands of feet away, and that will cause the fires to be much more intense, much bigger, because it has this. The ground doesn't soak up the water, so even if you do get rain, it doesn't help keep the fire out. The fire can burn underground where normally it couldn't, see? Because the ground is so tinder dry, it doesn't produce a cooling effect, a perspiring effect, a morning dew stuff, right? And it's just tinder dry, and so it's producing raw heat, and it's uninhabitable for your species. And so this is what unfortunately we're seeing coming to fruition. And we're seeing it worldwide. But particularly Canada, United States, we've seen, because they're on the other side of the Pacific, and this plume came through. This was enormous doses, sustained plumes that you can't perceive. And like in Thailand and South Korea, and when the big plumes were coming through, population was told to stay home. Certainly the school children, schools were cancelled, right? This current administration, though, in South Korea and Taiwan is still phasing out the nuclear, mind you. But the pro-nuclear community in Taiwan, after Fukushima, had 2,000 students, university students and academics and former alumni and corporations target for several years social media with propaganda coordinated efforts to challenge all the Twitter, all the Facebook, all the YouTube comment sections with troll accounts saying that no, it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in sunshine and flying on an airplane, sleeping next to somebody, and some of these lies, these are the same lies we've been listening to for 80 years, that are documented over 80 years. Each generation just regurgitates the same lies, and a scatter one will come up with a twist on the old lies, right? You know, some of the nuclear cranks that are out there. Thyroid cancer risk lasts the entire life after the exposure. So even though iodine 132, 133, which are prolific compared to 132 and are 9 times more effective than the 131, which is unbelievably effective at ionizing and radiating the thyroid glands of insects and birds and mammals and animals and everything, and humans. Children are 1,000 times more vulnerable than an adult because they're developing, so they're producing a prolific amount of radioactive hormones because of Fukushima and radioactive stem cells in their skeletons. And this leads to a host of congenital illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries in all the species, not just humans. And leukemia is when you eat so much food that's radioactive, drink so much water that's radioactive, breathe so much air that was radioactive, it's sequestered throughout your muscles, your organs, and your bones, the isotopes, the atoms, that everything is under siege from white blood cells. So they're producing more white blood cells than red blood cells. That's leukemia. And you can get leukemia by eating a large bag of rice from Japan. Or from food from any of these nuclear power plants within 100 miles of these disease factories. Imagine living within sight of a nuclear disease factory. The radiation. Like if you don't look for cancers only, look for heart problems, look for liver and lung and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline. And now we're seeing Alzheimer's and dementia and autism and Down syndrome, serious mental illnesses just skyrocket. It's skyrocket. And every time, what I do is whenever I get my hair cut, I'll go to a different hair place and I'll ask those questions. Are you guys seeing a lot of Alzheimer's and dementia? And like, oh yeah, it's crazy the last couple of years. I've never seen nothing like it. And this is a conversation you had many times. So you pull down a hot trigger when you bring up that question. And that's not the answer you want to really hear, is it? And radiation in small doses actually could be disproportionately worse. And doses spread out over time might be more dangerous than doses given at once, which is a renewed importance post-Fukushima. Or any nuclear power plant within 100 miles of it is going to get horrific radiation doses because the fuel pools on these sites are still splitting atoms. When they talk about why nuclear fuel is dangerous for thousands of years, and that's why people oppose it, what they forget to tell you is it's dangerous because it's splitting atoms. So each reactor core is still splitting the same atoms as it needs to boil water for 1 million homes and businesses each day. Like you can't even write down that number on a piece of paper, I don't think. There's that many zeros. We've unleashed the worst nightmare you can unleash on a planet. And so the nuclearproctologist.org, which is me, I'm an anti-nuclear think tank, and I'm anti-space nuclear because it's anthropogenic, it's man-made, it doesn't exist, it doesn't come from the sun, it's not produced by the solar system, and that we shouldn't introduce something into the solar system or the ecosystem of Earth that doesn't have an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. So there's nothing on the planet is able to defend against it. It attacks the white blood cells for the rest of its life. Insects, birds, animals, mammals, humans, flora, fauna, you name it. It has to attack because it's under attack. Because radiation pulses energy almost at the speed of light. And look at this industry's legacy if you really want to appreciate their contempt. Officials sharply raised the radiation levels for the victims to get iodide pills after the meltdowns, 75 times higher than the World Health Organization, which shouldn't even exist and are the degenerates, recommend for children. So that is the ultimate contempt. It's the ultimate betrayal. It's the ultimate hatred of humanity to do something like this. This is not a redeeming quality. This is pure hatred of you. It's pure contempt for you and your loved ones and the most vulnerable of society, right? So I don't do this constantly because it's fun, okay? There's not. The problem with this story is there's no redeeming qualities to the story. It's a terrible story. And so I don't blame people that can't handle it. I get that, right? I don't like it either, but somebody better do it, and you better be honest about it, and you better deal with it, right? And I make mistakes, but not when I'm talking about this topic, for instance, right? And I know I have a few loyal supporters, and I don't hit 100% in the baseball games ever, right? I know my Rumble site, I know I had a comment there, and I just reacted to the comment. I didn't look to see who left a comment, which was a mistake. And I think it was Colette, I guess, left a comment there about CGI, and I just seen CGI without looking at a name. And every time I see the CGI in that topic, I got a tendency to get a little bit upset about it. But it's only because I'm passionate. I don't mean any harm by it. But after the show, I looked at it and I said, "Oh, oops, that could be Colette." I gotta be maybe just trying to ask a question. I took it the wrong way, and that happens, right? That's going to happen because I have a lot on my plate every day. My plate is a very big, heavy plate, and it's a terrible plate to have. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 atoms a kilogram of cesium-137. Now, you had 10 million atoms per square meter sustained, according to the French government, covering North America. It's going to be infinitely tiny amount of that for an insect or a bird or something. But irreversible heart damage for a child with 50 atoms a kilogram, but you can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle. You can't see it. So how are you supposed to protect your child from 50? And the government is aware it is. Japan is aware of that. That's why they didn't stop growing food in the nuclear wasteland, because they don't care about you. They don't like you. And part of once this happened, then they decided, let's just go with it, never waste a crisis. And so they're exterminating not just the human populations, but all the species. And so they go under the guise of population. Right? Oh, there's too many people anyway, so it doesn't matter if people eat the radioactive food. And radiation sickness is one of the worst diseases you can have. It's one of the worst ways you can die. And they needed a fall guy, and they got me destroyed. They didn't count on the fact that I don't know how to quit. This is a story that's necessary, see? There's nothing I can do about it. This is my calling. I have no options but to do this program as much as I can to alert the population. Because imagine if everybody was aware of this, we would actually come up with solutions, wouldn't we? We would actually just look at geothermal too and get rid of nuclear and gas and oil and coal and be done with it. But social engineering, seeing that this was going to blow up in their faces, and they owned the medias. They bought the medias, and they gobbled up the rest of them post Fukushima, and now they have weaponized it against humanity and the species that are still hanging on. And I'm telling you right now, there is very little hanging on. We got another die-off video ready to go. Factors contributing to radiocesium variabilities in upland sheep flocks in Western Columbia, United Kingdom. Just 3,000. It's 2007, so the time of Chernobyl. That's 3,000 miles away. And that story is important because they closed 9,400 farms there after Chernobyl. And Chernobyl is just a paper towel compared to Fukushima. Chernobyl was brutal. And we've done entire presentations on that, on just academic studies. That I know last year I had done one, I think it was 600 or 900 studies into it. And just so that people could appreciate how many facets of the ecosystem and humanity that this infiltrates and permeates permanently. Because they didn't do all these studies and not find nothing. They found it in every single facet of the biosphere that they looked at. And I had showed over 900 studies in a single video on their anniversary last year to help articulate how aware they actually are, because they got to have it saying, well, we don't know the actual, and I can play the clips for you of the experts from the major shakers and movers institutions using that particular narrative, but it's simply not true. And the academic studies that I show you clearly demonstrate that. You're talking about Just the ones in that show, it would have took hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to produce. And then they're locked up behind a paywall so you can't see them. So there was 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom after Chernobyl. Chernobyl is nothing compared to Fukushima. It's about 1/4,000 of a Fukushima. So they covered it up, and they've done a great job of it. Big pat on the back for being scumbags, I guess. Why is almost every single nuclear power plant surrounded by farms when that's the worst thing you could do? So they've always hated us. They have always hated the species. And they always knew that the ultimate outcome of these disease factories would eventually, even without nuclear meltdowns, even without nuclear accidents, even without nuclear dumping, eventually would exterminate the planet. Ay, ay, ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, ay, ay. Let me see what I got done here. What are we doing? Yeah, I wasn't going to do a show tonight. I was starting up to speed, and I was like, if I don't do the show tonight, the industry gets another day off. I'm not going to be able to look in the mirror tomorrow. So I think we'll just call it quits right there. Mark Rogro donated $50. Thank you, Mark. I bought a jerry can of 5-gallon can or 6-gallon can of fuel with that today. I'm not sure which one I'm going to use it on. In the next couple of days, hopefully I'm back up and running again. I pushed myself hard on Sunday. And yeah, we'll just end it right there tonight, I guess. And so we lost a lot of preparatory work on Saturday. Which is insane. I'm actually got a new session ran, and I got to populate the new session now with the material over the next number of days, weeks, I guess, really. And then yeah, we had a lot of great more stories tonight. We're not going to get to it. So okay, I'll pick it up hopefully tomorrow night. I feel a bit more peppier by tomorrow night, if all goes well. Unfortunately, see, the problem is I'm just one person, and I can't do everything. And I'm not very healthy. I got hurt when I was young, right? This was quite the struggle for me to do things. But I got the push, so that's a good thing, I guess. I'll come and close down the poll here in a moment. Get some music going, maybe. I'll turn it up too loud, Dana. Let's come bring up the poll here. I'm censored, incredible censorship. Hi, everybody. 16 people. Bless your hearts, on a show I've been doing for over a decade. And I typically do it 5 days a week. And all we do is cover documentation. We don't exaggerate. We don't misrepresent stuff. We just deal with facts. Is 13 years of radioactive fallout, perpetual discharges, I got spelled that wrong. From Fukushima, an extinction level event. Well, I showed you the evidence in the beginning from the research expeditions and ongoing expeditions over the last number of years. And then the documentation, because I got a die-off show ready to go again, believe it or not. And we just had something like 90 whales in the, I can't remember, Scotland, the United Kingdom or something, just died. 90 pilot whales, rather. And scientists are perplexed and confused. They don't know what's going on. They're not allowed to mention the word Fukushima, right? So that's okay. We will. We got 32 votes. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for everybody. Have a great night. Have a great night. You see Dana and the Santa there at night? I hope he's doing okay. Alrighty, we'll see everybody hopefully tomorrow. Have a great night. Thanks for everybody. Have a great day tomorrow. Take care, folks. And if you make it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, folks. Have a great night. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Take care now.